And tonight we are coming to you from the Pacific Coast Highway. This is one of the most iconic highways in the entire country. You hear that? That's jackhammering going on. There are crews that are going through right now. They are making sure that all of this debris is not burning anymore. And yet, as we make our way down PCH, you still see smoke rising from a lot of these ashes. The amount of damage out here is indescribable. A lot of people have been saying, oh, well, the concrete buildings, and this is one of them, are still standing, but everything else fell apart. No, a lot of these buildings, the concrete ones, even collapsed down into the beach. You've got this home right here, 2 staircases that now lead to nowhere. It is a shell of what it once was. And then you've got firefighters who have been out here, again, making sure there are no hot spots as we head into another night of uncertainty. There are stretches here along PCH heading towards Malibu that are still standing. This is a row of homes here, probably about 14 homes still along the beach that were protected, and yet we see up in the hillsides to the left, many of those homes were completely wiped out, the entire hillside on fire. We've been talking to a lot of people that live in the homes that were able to protect their homes. Some of them were able to tap into the fire hydrants with their own hoses, their own protective gear. Whether or not that's something that you're supposed to do, those are all things that will be sorted out after this disaster. But then just so much destruction right here along the beach, and that stretches down quite a way. For a bit of time, a lot of this was threatening Santa Monica. Santa Monica was also evacuating. Fortunately, the flames didn't make it so far, but a lot of the iconic restaurants in this area, Moon Shadow for one, that was completely destroyed. Real Inn, that one is gone as well. We're going to let some emergency responders pass us here. And crews are working so quickly to try to remove a lot of the power lines, the down power lines. They're cutting up the power poles. They're removing transformers. PCH is a major highway here in California, and they are trying to get this clear. They're saying possibly this week. However, looking at the disaster and the destruction that we're seeing, it is going to be a miraculous feat if they can open this up in the coming days. There's still so much damage out here. And right now, people who live in this area still aren't being allowed back because there are roadblocks north and south of us. But again, as you look out, I mean, it is just so many cars sitting where there once was a garage, and now there's nothing. Now you only see the ocean in the background and the charred remains of some of the most expensive real estate in California. It is so haunting to see images like that, a staircase silhouetted by the ocean here, crews that are surveying the damage. They're having problems, or even they are having trouble processing what they are seeing. And again, this is just one stretch of a fire right now. The destruction goes down about 3-4 miles from where we are. This fire is massive, and you got to remember, we're talking about 2 different fires, the Eaton fire burning on the other side of the greater Los Angeles area. Tom Yamas kicks us off with an overview of what we're seeing today.
Fire crews working nonstop, waging an all-out battle from the air and the ground as they brace for the worst of those punishing Santa Ana winds. The National Weather Service warning conditions to be as bad as it gets, with the potential for hurricane-force winds over the next 48 hours. 13 million are under red flag warnings, stretching north of Santa Barbara to San Diego County. With more than 8,000 firefighters now on the front lines, officials insist they're better prepared with more ground and air resources this time around.
Just behind us here, you can see a massive burn scar. There's no more smoke, no more fire, but there's still a danger. And that's why there are lines of firefighters right now with cutting tools like chainsaws and axes, clearing all the brush, making sure there's no fuel in case those winds pick up and carry embers.
We were with CAL FIRE as they worked to clear brush before those dangerous winds hit burn zones.
So you're worried about this area because there's still brush here and it's so close to those homes right there.
That's correct.
Firefighters lined up on cliffs, scaling canyons, and on the lookout.
They're putting their lives on the line to get out in front of something that most people wouldn't get in front of.
Over the weekend, California's National Guard dropping flame retardant on hot spots in the Palisades fire. After flare-ups forced new evacuations in Encino and Brentwood, triggering this eerie fire tornado. The Eaton and Palisades fire still mostly uncontained, with speculation on the origins of the infernos running rampant. The ATF now leading a newly formed task force to investigate the cause of the Palisades fire, as multiple law enforcement sources tell NBC News that a possible human cause is an early focus in this case.
They're identifying cause and origin for each of these separate fires. There's so many of them. None have been ruled out of arson.
The death toll has now reached 24 and expected to rise, including 95-year-old Delise Mama D. Curry of Altadena.
That was her refrigerator. This is where she would be.
Her granddaughter looking for her remains in what's left of her home.
Mama D, are you here?
Officials today urging residents to stay out of evacuation zones.
People are saying, I just want to go look at my house and I want to see what's left. We know that, but we have people literally looking for the remains of your neighbors.
Law enforcement in the region announcing more than 70 arrests, including looting and burglary charges. The FBI says unauthorized drones over the fire zones are now well into the double digits as they search for the drone pilot that crashed into a Canadian super scooper last week, grounding the aircraft for days. Today, the Los Angeles Unified School District reopened most of its 1,000 campuses, giving students some return to normalcy.
I've been pretty scared coming here, but I feel as long as the doors are open, I feel safe.
Schools damaged by the fires or inside the evacuation zones remain closed, with tens of thousands pushed from their homes, now forced to start over. One estimate says the insured losses are already at least $30 billion.
Right now, I'm trying to just keep it together to find us a place to live for us, temporary living for our family and my parents.
Andrea Heindel lost her family home, as did her parents.
How tough is it?
It is tough. There's millions of people looking at millions of different places, and so we just have to figure out one step at a time how we're going to handle it.
And Tom joins us now from the Pacific Palisades. Tom, you were out there on the fire lines, a lot of firefighters preparing for a hellish night, the possibility of more fires with those Santa Ana winds picking back up. Can you tell us about their strategy going into tonight?
Yeah, look, what we saw was positive. It's been positive for the last 2 days. We saw a lot of smoke and some flames yesterday, but today we didn't see any smoke. We didn't see any flames. And what those crews essentially were doing is they were what's called cutting line. They were clearing out that brush and digging out any hot spots. The soil and the ash, it's still so very hot, as you know, Gadi. So if those winds pick up, it could pick up little embers and maybe start a bigger fire. But from what we saw today, at least in the areas where we were in the Palisades fire, very, very dry, right? You just saw burn scars, essentially craters, right? Those canyons look like craters now. But these incredible firefighters are scaling those canyons. They're going up, they're going down. They have heavy tools in their hands, and they are working nonstop. One of the firefighters you heard from right there told me they're on a 24-hour shift today, just to give you a sense of how hard they're working. And these are, besides the fire, besides the winds, I mean, they're at high elevations on slopes that are almost 90 degrees, right? It's incredible work that they do, and they're not stopping.
Yeah, treacherous terrain out here, especially along the coast. And Tom, the biggest question in Los Angeles, and obviously for everybody watching, but particularly here in Los Angeles, is how did these fires start? And I know the rumor mill / possibly confirmed information is whether or not this is human caused, right? Do we know how these fires were sparked?
Look, it's still unclear, but our investigative producer brought up something very important today, which is, you know, they're going to investigate this. And right now, there's a lot of possibilities, right? It's a crime, essentially, if it was caused by a human. And some of the theories that are out there that they're going to be looking at, and our KNBC chopper was over the ATF late today, looking at the Palisades fire and a location where it may have started. There's one theory that there was a fire after New Year's Eve from fireworks on New Year's Day, and they put out that fire. But it was several days later when the Palisades fire started. But some theory is that maybe that ground was still very hot, and it somehow, with the winds picked up, it reignited. That's one theory. The other theory is that there were people who were camped out there. Maybe there were people who were homeless. Maybe there were other people, transients, who were out there and they somehow started the fire. They'll be investigating all those causes. It's unclear right now if it was a human who caused the Palisade fire. They're also looking at the Altamira fire as well, and some power lines and towers that were out there. Residents say they saw the blaze pop up around those towers. But again, this is very early in the investigation.
Yeah, people deserve answers after everything that we've been through here. Tom Yamas, thank you so much. And now let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns to tell us more about what these strong winds are going to do tonight and if they're going to threaten a lot of the progress that we saw being made today. Hey there, Bill.
Gadi, we're all just waiting to see two things. How windy will it get, and where, if any, new fires will they form? Because that's going to decide what happens in the next 48 hours, because conditions are just ripe once again for, fires that form and spread rapidly. And then if it's too windy, the aircraft can't fight it from the skies, and that means the firefighters on the ground, it's extremely difficult, with how much fuel's out there and the gusty winds. So 13 million people. We go all the way from Ventura County to outside of San Diego, all the way down to the Mexican border. Humidity levels are very low, and the winds could gust as high as 70 miles per hour. Remember the last event last week when we had the horrific fires and lost so many structures? The winds gusted 80 to 100. So this is a notch below that, but it's still high enough that it may be difficult for the aircraft to fly. And this area that's hashed is in what we call a particularly dangerous situation for the fire weather. This is where we could see explosive fire growth, and this is where life-threatening conditions could happen. If a new fire forms, evacuation orders will go out quick, and people have to get out of the way and evacuate in a hurry. And this is from Malibu northwards of Ventura to Fillmore, Pyramid Lake, just to the south and north of Santa Clarita, and the mountains here around Angeles National Forest. Now, the humidity levels have been bone dry. Desert air has been in place. We would love to get the flow coming off the ocean because that's more humid air. But as long as these offshore winds continue, if we get these gusty winds, that's when the problems are going to occur. And the winds have already picked up. I mean, in some cases, they've already arrived. And everyone in L.A. may be like, I haven't noticed anything. This is not a Los Angeles event. This is to the north of L.A. and to the north of L.A. This is much different than a week ago where we had those strong winds all the way down through Los Angeles. This is going to be up here, 50 to 70 mile per hour winds, more remote areas, but there still could be mountain communities where we get structures threatened if any new fires form. This is the wind gust at 5 a.m. 66, 58, 57, 64. So you can see that's going to be strong enough that it's going to be very difficult. Imagine trying to drop water from a helicopter in 66 mile per hour winds. It's almost going to be impossible to get it to land where you want it, and it may not even be safe for the aircraft to fly. Then when we talk about the wind gusts tomorrow afternoon, this is at 6 p.m., it comes down a little bit. So this isn't going to be a steady wind the entire time. Highest winds tomorrow morning, and then we're going to do it all over again Wednesday late in the night into early Thursday morning. So those are kind of the key points for when we're going to deal with the strongest winds. So the fire weather alerts for tomorrow, the extreme risk, Glendora to Santa Clarita, Thousand Oaks, that's the areas we just talked about. Notice that in Los Angeles, you're only under an elevated risk. It's really dry, but we're not going to see that high, you're not going to see the high winds in Los Angeles southwards all the way down towards Santa Ana. The air quality has been a little bit improved today. We've, instead of being unhealthy, we're just in the moderate. So the smoke, they really knocked the fires down this weekend, and that really helped with the smoke. And then, Gadi, let's just end with the unfortunate. We've only had a drop in the bucket, a 3% of normal rainfall in Southern California, and we're still looking at zero rain over the next 7 days. So unfortunately, even after this event's over, the next time it's windy, we're going to do this all over.
Yeah, unfortunately, indeed. Bill Cairns, thank you so much. Cal Fire Battalion Chief David Acuna joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us, Battalion Chief. I'm not sure if you were able to hear that forecast, but I know that's something that you guys have already been preparing for. The thing that concerns me is usually you see all of the burn scar and you think, okay, this is where the fire has burned. All of the high winds are in areas that are not necessarily protected by burnout that we've seen, right? How are crews preparing for increased fire risk over the next couple of days in those areas?
Well, thank you for having me on. So, yeah, one of the big problems is that when we have these north and east winds, which is similar to the direction they were coming from earlier on Tuesday when this all started, is that the containment lines can be challenged, but even material that's burning maybe 300, 400 feet in, when the wind is 70 miles an hour, it's going to be blowing significantly. And although there are some areas that are in a less of a threat, wind at 30 and 40 miles per hour is still a big challenge.
And what are the gusts that take aircraft out of the sky for you?
So most of the time, aircraft can fly until about 30 miles per hour. It depends. There has a lot to do with terrain, because our professional and dedicated pilots want to be up there. They want to be supporting the crews on the ground. But we cannot risk aircraft. We cannot risk the people flying the aircraft. And then we don't want to risk anyone on the ground.
Yeah, it's such a valuable asset. And when it comes to the two biggest fires right now, Palisades and Eaton, how are the containment lines looking?
So they're getting better, so 14 and 33% respectively. But again, we define containment as we are fairly certain that the fire will not jump over those lines. With 70-mile-per-hour winds or in that area, we're very concerned about the containment lines. So we're being very cautious. Having additional people, we have additional resources staged at our mobilization unit, because the entire Southern California area is at risk for a new start of a fire, which is why everyone is staged and ready to immediately attack the fire should one start.
And as we speak, I mean, we're seeing a convoy of equipment coming through. A lot of water just went by us in what looked like private tanker trucks. But are you prepared when it comes to the water, when it comes to the pressure, when it comes to all the things that seem to have been problems during the first fire?
So water is a finite resource when it comes out of a tank or even a reservoir, right? So the way I describe it is, imagine your garden hose at home. If you have 2 or 3 pinholes in it, like from a fire hydrant fighting 2 or 3 fires, you're okay, no problem. But if you have 5 or 10,000 holes through your garden hose, you simply cannot maintain pressure. But all of our dedicated firefighters are now out there with the water tenders, and so now they have multiple options on how to apply water and actively engage and attack these fires to keep them as small as possible. CAL FIRE's goal is to keep 95% of all wildfires to 10 acres or less.
And finally, Battalion Chief, going into tonight, going into tomorrow, is there an area that you're particularly concerned about?
Yes, and that's every area that's not currently burning. So it is the next fire that we're more concerned about. It is the fire that we don't know that's going to happen. And fire service, we plan for an unknown event at an unknown time and an unknown location. And so the next fire, that's why we need the people, the public, to be very cautious. Do not start one additional spark. You know, hold off on mowing. Don't have a campfire in your backyard. Don't be doing grinding work on your chain link fence in the next 24, 48 hours.
Every area that is not currently burning, that is your biggest concern, and that is such a wake-up call, hopefully, to everybody that's watching right now. CAL FIRE Battalion Chief David Acuna, thank you so much, and thank you for everything that you've been doing.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. And with red flag conditions ramping up, the winds starting to pick up, a lot of people in Southern California are getting into defense mode, taking matters into their own hands. Most people are heeding those evacuation warnings, but there are some who are picking up garden hoses to private hires. Homeowners are trying to do whatever it takes to avoid a repeat of last week. Take a look.
For days, so many across Los Angeles faced off against apocalyptic wildfires. Some homeowners defying the evacuation orders, choosing to protect their properties amid the hellscape.
We need a water drop.
We need a water drop.
Sprinklers, hoses, generators, pumps, and tonight facing new red flag warnings. Some Angelenos say they are preparing for round 2. In wealthy enclaves, rows of water trucks and private firefighters standing at the ready.
And right here we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different water trucks. There's another 3 down the way.
Those in the evacuation zones who lived to tell the tale of how they saved their streets say they did what they could with high-pressured hoses.
So we were in all of our neighbors' backyards and lugging our hoses around.
In Altadena, Felipe Carrillo saving 2 houses on his street with a garden hose.
I caught on fire a couple of times.
You caught on fire?
Yes, and so what I started doing is every once in a while I would just spray myself with the garden hose. Just soak myself with the garden hose and continue to fight.
Fire officials say those who stay to fight the fire are putting their lives at risk. 66-year-old Victor Shaw died in the Eaton fire. His remains found holding a garden hose. Right along the coast, owners of this row of homes had their own fire hoses ready and some willing to risk their lives.
There's another hot spot that just started up, so we're hooking up our fire hoses again to put it down before the wind starts again.
When the fire rolled in, Clayton Colbert and his friends stood their ground, tapping into the hydrant and saving 6 homes.
Do you have any firefighting experience? I mean,
I do now.
Yeah. What do you think would have happened if you and your neighbors weren't here?
Oh, my house would have been gone in a matter of minutes.
Tonight, Steve Foster's home is still standing, but most of the surrounding community is gone.
It's been difficult, but we're getting through it.
Would you leave?
I'm not leaving. I've been here the whole time. I have no intentions of leaving until my neighbors are back.
And when we were talking about that stretch of homes that was saved, it's way down there. You can see kind of in the distance, there's some structures that are still up. However, take a look here. This is the stretch of homes that was burned to the ground. And then again, as we walk down towards where the sun has now set, it is mile after mile after mile that looks like this. The things that are standing, pieces of concrete, chimneys like this. Again, this is right here along the Pacific Coast Highway. This is some of the best real estate in California. It was those beachside homes that you would pass here in Malibu. But all of this, again, we're in Malibu right now. We are not in the Pacific Palisades where this started, but that fire spread so quickly, so fast. But we do have Dana Griffin, who is over in the Pacific Palisades, I believe, at an ATF possibly investigative scene or crime scene that they've been looking at. The big question, Dana, so many of us have, how did this fire start? Do we have any answers tonight?
We have no answers, Gadi, but this is the first clue. We are in a neighborhood in Pacific Palisades, and just behind me, actually, let me turn this way so you can actually see it. Just up this drive, you see the yellow tape that is blocking off this area. There's a neighborhood to the right, and all of these homes are sitting in that neighborhood. We have seen several ATF agents in that neighborhood walking, and they even were up in the hill at one point. They came down on ATVs, and they had these shirts and jackets that read ATF, also LAFD arson. Now, you see that, and it may make you think that that could be something that they are looking at. They've already said they're not ruling out anything, but that does not mean that this is an arson-related case. We do know, based on sources that NBC News has confirmed, they believe this is human cause. Now, human cause could be anything from accidental to a cigarette butt being lit to arson. They have not given us any indication, but you can see some of the video that I shot there on my cell phone, the ATF agents shaking hands. You can see them walking under that yellow tape, and they're going toward the back of the neighborhood. It's unclear if they're looking at one home or possibly several. My producer, Giselle, she was talking to one of the agents and said, hey, is this the genesis? And all he did was shrug and said, maybe. Gadi?
Huh. What are people around there saying?
There's no one in the neighborhood, so we believe this neighborhood is still evacuated, so there's only law enforcement, so no one else we could talk to. I asked one of the ATF agents if he could speak to media. He said no.
And all this is happening as the financial toll of last week just continues to add up, right?
They believe that for insured homeowners, it could cost $30 billion. And other insurers and other companies are putting out more estimates, saying that the damage in total could cost.
It looks like we might be losing Dana there. But again, she was talking about the estimates, and I think she said $30 billion. And of course, those are estimates that are preliminary right now, and they could continue to climb. Dana Griffin, thank you so much. And again, we've got connectivity issues out here. We're using a satellite truck to bring you this broadcast, so things are a little hit and miss when it comes to communication. But we are in Malibu, where the devastation is just hard to put into words. Right now, we want to show you a different perspective. Take a look. Check this out. On the left is a video that was taken by a couple in May of last year. On the right, journalists followed those exact footsteps to show you the scale of destruction. I mean, words fail here. Let's bring in Ellison Barber. She is out in Altadena, California right now. Ellison, lots of people are trying to get back home. We've seen the frustration at the roadblocks. What are you seeing and hearing out there?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we spent the last couple days at one of those roadblocks. A lot of people frustrated they couldn't get in. Police at some points were doing escorts. At times it seemed to be 3 cars every few minutes. Then the time between sort of expanded. People were getting frustrated, feeling like they didn't know what was going on, wanting to get back to the areas that were impacted the most by these fires to assess what is left of their homes, or if they believed their homes were still standing, to get some basic necessities, clothes, because so many people didn't have a chance to pack anything, right? Medicine, or maybe check on pets. But yesterday, we were at one of those checkpoints, and as this long line of cars and people on foot were waiting, asking police, when can we go in, a car drove by on loudspeaker saying there will be no escorts today. And today at a press conference, we heard from the LAPD, and they said they have temporarily halted all of those police escorts into the hard-hit areas, the mandatory evacuation zones, saying that it was simply not safe to continue doing those. I think we have some footage we can show you of some of the people and the lines that we saw throughout all of this as that police car drove by over the loudspeaker saying there will be no escorts today. We were actually in the middle of an interview with a woman. That video right there, that is me going to her house. We were talking with her, and she was talking about how she and her fiance lived with her fiance's 81-year-old mother. She bought their home in Pacific Palisades 42 years ago. She was telling us how a lot of people have this concept that these fires have mostly impacted wealthy people and celebrities. And they were saying, we've lived here 42 years. We don't have a lot of means. She worked for a nonprofit. Her fiance worked at a storage unit facility. The owner of the home was 81 years old, and she was saying how they didn't know what to do. I asked her, as all of the cars started leaving, what were you trying to get? And I said, it's a long shot, but can I take your address? And we would be up kind of in that area anyways. We ended up being able to make our way to the house between live shots and went in, and she gave me really specific directions, texted me, telling me where things were located, and we were able to get some medicine and medical supplies that 81-year-old, her name was Judy, needed. And while I was in there, I also saw some family photos, and so I grabbed those because I thought maybe they would like to have those at where they're temporarily staying. And it was a brief moment where we had the opportunity to help someone while we were doing our jobs. And so our team, we took that and went and helped that one person. But there are so many people that are still wishing they could have some help. They could get home. They could get necessities. And it's really frustrating, even if they understand the safety concerns, that they can't come back to their homes and see what is left of them, or if they're still standing, get some basic things. Because, Gadi, so many people were looking at me and saying, these are the only clothes I had. I just ran, and I kind of just want to get underwear, just like the most basic things you can imagine, because they're just living off of whatever they had with them when they had to run and flee for their lives. Gadi.
Yeah, and at those roadblocks, I mean, frustration is continuing to rise, and yet they're still grid searching Altadena, right? Any word on how long that could go?
Yeah, I mean, we've been spending most of the day today in Altadena with some of those search and rescue teams, and they're saying they are doing search and recovery missions now. They are on day 3 of a grid search in this area. They are going meticulously, block by block, looking for people, remains, also at times having to stop to put out hot spots like we saw at this business again today in the downtown main Altadena area. They say that the fact that they're doing these search and recovery missions here is one of the other reasons why they simply can't let people back into these areas. Officials saying today, we are literally looking for the remains of your neighbors. They told us that they are prioritizing going to homes, locations where they had incomplete 911 calls, where someone had called 911 at the peak of the fires, seemingly in distress, and then that call disconnected. They're going to those homes and then also searching in areas where family members, loved ones have reported people as missing to see if they can find them and most likely recover their remains. One thing that was horrific to hear, but they said one area where they really are searching in a lot of homes are pools, because when flames enclose on people, they look for water because that's the safest option, and they believe there are people who maybe did that and then didn't make it out. That death toll is expected to rise in the coming days. The question is how high, and the hope is that it won't be too much higher, but there are still at least 24 people unaccounted for and considered missing by fire and police officials here. Gadi.
Yeah, so grim. Ellison Barber, praying for a miracle. Thank you so much for your reporting. Meanwhile, as we talk about all these multi-million-dollar homes, there are some very important people on the fire lines who are finally getting to share their voice as well, in part thanks to a pretty big Twitch streamer, Hassan Piker. You might have already seen shots of inmates out there on the fire lines. Right now, there are like 900 to 1,000 of them. It's a program that's been around for a while here in California, but what is catching people's attention, well, part of it is the pay. It's like $10 a day. They can earn a little bit more when actively fighting fires, an additional $1 an hour during emergencies, and working in that program can also get them some time off their sentence and for some, record expungement. But joining us now is Twitch streamer and YouTuber Hassan Piker. He lives out here in LA. He headed out to where they've been staging to help shed some light on what they do to help the rest of us out here. Hassan, thanks so much for being with you. But before we get into this, I do want to play a clip of this interview for viewers. It was a fascinating interview. I think you talked to a man by the name of Williams. Let's take a quick look.
Right now they're on break, right? They're doing 24 hours off. But when you're back out there, you sleep out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So they give you like what? Like they give you gear and then they give you like sleeping gear?
Pretty much what you got right here. And then you got your Nomex on, your Nomex shirt on.
That's it?
Yeah, that's all.
They don't give you any sleeping gear?
No, not on the mountain.
And Hassan, we've been with inmate crews. I've never seen them give such insight as they did with you. If you get a chance, anybody that's watching, they should check out your whole clip. What was your impression of what it's like for them and the work that they're doing right now?
I had an incredible opportunity to be able to talk to these guys directly, uninterrupted, in a very real setting when they were on their 24-hour break. Because of the wonderful work that Scott Budnick, he's a Hollywood producer, and he started the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, is doing, specifically with the incarcerated firefighters. And in that process, I found their experience to be very dignified from their own assessment. The fact that they were able to contribute back to their communities was something that they truly appreciated in terms of the opportunity. Although the conditions are still obviously very grim. And one of the major things that they brought up was, of course, the wages, as you guys also pointed out to. Right now, I believe it's around $24 a day when they're actively fighting wildfires. And I think that is one area that desperately needs improvement. Another thing that I was also shocked by was the fact that in order to be able to volunteer for this program, you actually leave prison and go to a conservation camp to get training, and then you remain there when you're not actively out in the field fighting fires. And one thing that they mentioned were the comparably much more humane conditions at conservation camps. Some of the inmates reported that they had access to weight training facilities and like actual real weights. Apparently in California prisons, you don't have access to real weights any longer. And little things like that, I think, go a very long way in making inmates feel human again, and making inmates feel like real people rather than cogs in a machine. And I think that is tremendously helpful in rehabilitation and the rehabilitative process, and also helping them reintegrate back into society after they're done serving their time.
Yeah, one of the most fascinating parts of the interview, I thought, was when you started to ask them about what this was like compared to what it's like in lockup. If we have some of that, can we play a little quick clip there?
Is it better than being in prison or no?
It's way better, because I was in a prison yard. I'm seeing guys get stabbed, get jumped, get beat up. The cops treat us like. But here, we get better treatment, right? They talk to us like humans. They talk to us like humans. We got a job. We're underpaid, but we got a job. Yeah. You feel me? And then the community comes out and shows us all kinds of love. We never received that growing up. We never received that kind of love, that kind of recognition for anything we've done. So now, doing this kind of stuff and all this love coming, that's life-changing.
Yeah, We never received that growing up. I mean, like, again, this interview is absolutely fascinating. Do you think it's working?
I think the incarcerated firefighter program is pretty successful in terms of finding a lot of the people that are slated for rehabilitation, and it seemingly has been very successful as far as what they have reported. Another thing that they kept repeating over and over again was the fact that inside of the camp structure, there's a lot more unity. There's no racial tension or animosity of the sort. There's no violence, because they desperately do not want to go back to the regular prison structure, as Kimbo also pointed out right there, because there's a lot of violence in regular prison. And I think that it is not only an example of the success of the program itself, but I think it's also a criticism of the current carceral state in a state like California, where the prison structure needs desperate reform so that the entirety of the California prison system could look closer to the camp conditions that exist right now, that help, I think, tremendously in the rehabilitative process.
It's so cool to see the sense of pride and giving back to the community. I mean, we all owe them a huge thanks, and thanks to you for helping shed light on what they're going through. I mean, we've been on the fire lines, and fire lines are hell. So kudos to all those guys that are out there doing the work. Hassan Piker, thanks so much for joining us, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. We've got a lot more to get to tonight here from Southern California, but after a quick break, we're going to talk to Sam Brock. He has got the other headlines we're watching, including some renewed hopes for a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. That's coming up, so stay tuned.
And welcome back. We are going to be rejoining Gadi in Malibu in just a moment. But first, let's take a quick look at what's going on around the globe. Heavy rains and floodings are destroying homes in Bolivia. Officials there say that powerful waters wiped out entire communities over the weekend. Victims forced to evacuate some of the hardest hit places. You see that gushing water. Authorities right now just beginning to provide humanitarian aid. In Russia right now, that country trying to figure out how to contain a massive oil spill a month after 2 tankers were struck by a storm. The country is forming an emergency task force, and President Vladimir Putin has called it one of the most serious environmental challenges there in recent years. So far, more than 26 tons of oil have spilled into the Black Sea. A tsunami alert has been lifted in Japan after an earthquake rocked the southwest part of the country. The 6.6 magnitude quake triggered a pretty small tsunami, relatively speaking, reaching land within about a half hour of the quake. There were not initially any reports of damage, but people in some coastal areas were forced to evacuate as a precaution. And in Turkey, a 5-month-old gorilla is recovering right now at an Istanbul zoo after this adorable little guy, you're about to see him here, was rescued from a cargo hold on board a Turkish Airlines flight from Nigeria to Thailand. The hope now is to get him back to his natural habitat. If you're wondering, how did this happen? Officials say that Turkey is becoming a hub for illegally traded animals. Now to the Mideast, and promising news that so many have waited to hear, that there's been serious progress on a potential ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Today, the State Department said that they are closer to a truce than they have ever been before. NBC's Danielle Hamajian has more from Tel Aviv.
Well, it's not a done deal yet, but all the parties involved have indicated that serious progress has been made. Now, according to a senior Israeli official briefing military correspondents here in Israel this evening, it appears as though during the first phase of this deal, we would see the release of 33 hostages on humanitarian grounds. So we're talking about children, women, female soldiers, the elderly, and those who are ill, all believed by Israel to be alive. In return for those hostages, Israel will have to release what is being described as a significant number of Palestinian detainees. Now, it's worth noting here that since October 7th, 2023, Israel has arrested thousands of Palestinians in the West Bank, many of them in administrative detention, which means they haven't been charged or tried. Now, once the first phase is complete, 16 days will then go by before all the other hostages are released. We're talking here about the men, the male soldiers, and all those killed either on October 7th, 2023, or in captivity. During those two stages, the IDF will withdraw from populated areas into what's being described as a buffer zone to protect the local communities along the Gaza Strip, as well as the Philadelphia corridor, which is, of course, a strip of land between Gaza and Egypt. And what we are told is that the IDF will not leave the Gaza Strip until all hostages have been released.
All right, still some pieces to work out there. Danielle Hamamdjian, thank you so much. In recent weeks, North Korean troops have become part of the Russian-Ukraine war, fighting for Russia. South Korean officials say that these North Korean soldiers have been ordered to kill themselves to avoid being captured. But now 2 of those soldiers have been taken alive. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer has the full story.
Tonight, the first North Korean soldiers Ukraine says it has captured alive. Seen in this video being questioned by Ukraine's military with help from South Korean intelligence. One telling interrogators he thought he was going to Russia for training, not war. The soldiers providing a rare glimpse into how North Korean troops are fighting with Russian forces in Kursk, where U.S. officials say they're taking heavy losses. Roy Sung-hyun was a North Korean soldier until 2019, when he ran across the demilitarized zone to freedom in South Korea.
Honestly, it's not easy to capture North Korean soldier.
Why is it not easy?
Before captured, they suicide themselves. They training like that.
He says every recruit learns a song about saving their last bullet for themselves to avoid capture. Interviews with several former North Korean soldiers reveal one of the world's largest standing armies lacks regular training in modern warfare.
I think I only fired 3 bullets per year. When I moved to a special force, we do had more than 20 bullets.
Most months, they say, spent on farming and construction. For Lee Chul-yoon, who swam 6 hours to escape, the main enemy was hunger.
그렇죠.
Grass, potatoes, even tree bark, he says.
You ate tree bark.
There's no rule for the kind of meal served. President Zelensky now making an offer to Kim Jong-un to swap his soldiers for Ukrainian prisoners in Russia, the captives living proof, he says, of the widening war. Janice Mackey-Frayer, NBC News, Seoul.
All right, turning our attention now back to the U.S. In a critical week ahead in Washington, President-elect Trump's cabinet picks are set for a grilling from senators. The key issues that Pete Hegseth is going to have to address when he's questioned tomorrow. And welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines that we're watching tonight. As early as tomorrow, the public could have access to part of Special Counsel Jack Smith's final report detailing why he charged President-elect Trump with trying to overturn the 2020 election. But a Florida federal judge, Aileen Cannon, will not allow the release of a second part of that report, looking into Smith's investigation into Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents. A Texas man has been charged with stalking a WNBA superstar, Caitlin Clark. Police said that 55-year-old Michael Lewis repeatedly sent Clark threats and sexually violent messages on social media. He even traveled to Indiana, according to authorities, where she plays, to be closer to the basketball player. Lewis now faces 6 years in prison if convicted. Blue Origin has scrubbed the first attempt to launch its New Glenn rocket, named after astronaut John Glenn. The launch appears to have been called off because of technical issues. Blue Origin has yet to set a new launch date. But a live stream from Cape Canaveral appears to show that flare stacks are active, which means if we're reading the tea leaves here, the teams might just be trying to refuel for another launch. And the show must go on. The 2025 Grammy telecast will do just that, slated to air February 2nd and in Los Angeles. The Recording Academy has donated $1 million to relief efforts for fire victims and says it will continue to raise funds to help those devastated by these fires. The news comes as the Oscars have delayed their nomination process for their award show, moving the announcement to January the 23rd. And the NFL's final wild card playoff game is going on right now between the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Rams. That game was moved from L.A. to Arizona because of the wildfires. The winner will play the Detroit Lions in the divisional round next weekend. Well, right now we are just 1 week away now from the second inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. So between cabinet confirmation hearings, executive orders, and the event itself, Washington, D.C. right now is buzzing. NBC senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake has the very latest. Garrett?
Sam, it was supposed to be a 3-hearing start to a massive 13-hearing week tomorrow. Has now been knocked down to just 1 hearing, but it is the most interesting one. Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's nominee to lead the Department of Defense, will have the spotlight all to himself, something he probably doesn't want tomorrow when he sits down in the hot seat before the Senate Armed Services Committee. This is someone who has questions about his character, about his past conduct, about whether he's really up to the task of leading the Pentagon, a 3 million plus person agency, and he's got to convince Republicans. So what we're going to see tomorrow is, I think, a full frontal assault, to borrow some military nomenclature here, from Senate Democrats trying to undermine Pete Hegseth on all of those points. But the audience here is in part the American people, but really it's those Republican senators who are still on the fence. Maybe they have met with Pete Hegseth, maybe they've not, maybe they've started to review or ask questions about his FBI background check. But Democrats want to raise questions in the minds of these Republican senators. Is this really the best that we can do? Is this really someone who we want leading the Pentagon under a Donald Trump presidency? Those Republicans, though, are going to be under enormous pressure to get some of these Trump nominees across the finish line, particularly in the national security space, as early as possible. And it really doesn't get much easier, with the exception of Marco Rubio and his hearing on Wednesday. A lot of the other national security folks like Tulsi Gabbard and Kristi Noem are also controversial and not going to be easier votes for those who want to see kind of more traditional foreign policy experience brought before the Senate for these big cabinet posts. Sam?
All right, Garrett, expect some fireworks from D.C. Thank you. You can watch Pete Hegseth's full confirmation hearing right here on NBC News Now. Our special coverage begins tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Before we go, we are going to head back to Gadi in Malibu for so much more on the wildfires, including an emotional reunion. A man finds his beloved dog days after being separated. To meet the firefighter who made this reunion all possible. The heartwarming story coming up next.
And back out here on the Pacific Coast Highway with fires burning, winds picking back up a little bit tonight and a lot overnight. Air quality is still a huge concern. And if you do live out here in LA, the city of Los Angeles is actually starting to give out free N95 masks. They're going to be doing that at public libraries, recreation centers across the city. And smoke has still been blanketing the skies in a lot of areas. But the forecast for more dangerous wind ahead, the fight is far from over. But there is a place on the other side of the country that could help with this battle. That's a lab where researchers are studying this kind of stuff. Bianca Beltran with our Boston station NBC 10 has this fascinating story.
We do know that it's one of the most common ways to spread a forest fire, and for it to be transition between forest fire to a residential area fire.
To study the creation and movement of embers, researchers at WPI Fire Protection Engineering combine some of the essential elements. Fuel.
This is basically just like placing it in front of the sparker.
Fire and wind. Using both image analysis and sample collection, PhD student Fernando Evansberger hopes their research could one day help predict fire movement and inform how communities respond.
We could also be able to know like where the fire is going to propagate, so we can deploy part of the resources there, and we stop the fire from starting instead of having to fight it after.
WPI's Dean of Engineering, John McNeil, says their research aims to make a difference in the lives of people at risk of wildfire danger.
The tragedy of what's happening in Los Angeles, people are building in areas that years ago, not that long ago, seemed to be safe. Wildfires are happening more often, they're more intense, they cost more. Having a research program that's looking at how we can mitigate those effects, inform firefighting practices, maintenance practices, building, so that people's lives are better, that's really powerful.
Now, one of the challenges with studying wildfires is there are so many variables, and so these experiments will continue taking into account different fuel sources and wind speeds. Reporting in Worcester, I'm Bianca Beltran, NBC 10 Boston.
Bianca, thank you. And finally tonight, amid all the devastation and the destruction in California, there is a miraculous reunion that was captured on video that we want to show you. We're talking about Oreo, the dog who's gone viral for surviving the intense flames and reuniting with their owner who was forced to evacuate. Liz Schwartz gives us a look into the story that has captured so many hearts around the country. Here it is.
That was it. I couldn't go.
We first met Casey Colvin amidst the chaos of evacuations.
My boss is actually calling me saying, is everything okay in the Palisades? I said, I'm in the city. I don't know.
The Pacific Palisades resident raced back, even renting a bike, trying to get home to his 2 dogs inside, but couldn't get past the roadblock.
I literally rescued them off the street. They deserve better than this.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
How do I get to my house?
A firefighter offered to go for him, knocking down his door, rescuing one of his 2 dogs. But the other, Oreo, was still missing.
Got the dog?
Yeah, this is my daughter. The behavioral dog, he ran out of the house.
Later that night, the Palisades fire reduced Casey's home to rubble, but his only concern, Oreo. For 5 days, he was missing. Then, Casey got a call. Oreo spotted in the neighboring property.
It's your daddy! Hi, Bubba! How's the fire? Oh, honey! Oh, honey! Oh, my God!
It's the happy ending Casey prayed for.
Oh, honey! Oh,
and there's one person he really wanted to thank.
Hey, this guy saved your life! This guy saved your life! And you look like a Ken doll! What's up, dude?
Cal Fire Battalion Chief Brent Pasqua.
If that dog could talk, he would have a story to tell. He would have a national bestseller.
Had he not knocked down that door, both dogs would have been trapped inside.
Casey, what do you want to say to Brent?
When I first met you, I was in the middle of crisis. I was in the middle of a firestorm. My dogs would have died if not for you.
Just an incredible reunion there. So happy to see. And Gadi, a lot of people have been asking, wait, did he leave his dogs? Why wasn't he with them? And we just want to point out that he was at work when all of this happened, when he got that evacuation notice and just raced back, doing everything he could to get here. And it was just too late. He couldn't get past the roadblocks. It's just remarkable also that Oreo was able to survive through all of this. We're outside the home, Casey's burned down home, where apparently some neighbors over the past few days or people had seen him running around, sleeping in the rubble of a neighbor's home. Someone maybe was able to put, we're told, food and water out for him, which helped him survive. Just an incredibly happy ending that we all need right now through this devastation. Gadi?
Absolutely. Oreo reminding us that there is always a little bit of hope. Liz Schwartz, incredible story. Thank you so much. And as we end our show here, we're just getting another alert of an evacuation warning. This one out in Riverside County, Harupa. This one looks like a small fire right now, about an acre, but it is something that is concerning officials out there. Heavy loads of fuel. But again, back out here along the PCH here in Malibu, this behind us, just a reminder that something like this can happen anytime the winds kick up here in California. So please have your bags packed tonight as we head into another day of uncertainty. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. Complete coverage of these California wildfires continues next on NBC News Now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.